Hello, friends. I am Vitaly Portnik. In the coming days, we need to ensure that peace in Ukraine can be achieved within a few weeks. If that's the case, we're in the game. If we find out that it's impossible, we will move on. The United States has other priorities. With such a statement, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke after negotiations in Paris, which included representatives from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Ukraine. These were the first negotiations in this format dedicated to ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. The next such meeting is scheduled to take place in the coming days in London. In this way, the United States demonstrated that they are ready to consult with their European allies. Incidentally, for the first time in a State Department statement, Europeans are specifically referred to as US allies concerning the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And it is noted that they take into account Ukraine's position on how to achieve a ceasefire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. But along with this, if Rubio's words are understood correctly, these meetings by the Americans also demonstrate that they have taken all necessary steps to achieve a ceasefire in the Russian-Ukrainian war. President Donald Trump spoke with the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. American officials held corresponding rounds of negotiations with the Russian and Ukrainian delegations. Now, the same representatives of the United States are also conducting consultations with representatives of European governments. And a ceasefire cannot be achieved because the parties to the conflict cannot reach an agreement among themselves. If the United States continues to present itself as a mediator in the Russian-Ukrainian war, rather than as a state that stands guard over the protection of international law and the interests of the democratic world, they can, of course, afford to withdraw from the peace negotiation process and consider that now the steps towards a ceasefire on the Russian-Ukrainian front should be taken by the Europeans because, as the President of the United States, Donald Trump himself says, it is not his war and therefore not the war of the United States of America. So let the Europeans deal with this war which is taking place on their continent. Already at the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency in 2021, many observers said that the American president, recalling his first term in the Oval Office, is only capable of quick moves and successes and refuses to engage in events that require serious and, most importantly, long-term efforts to achieve success. They recalled Donald Trump's meetings with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, from whom the then American president tried to secure a renunciation of the nuclear program. These negotiations ended in a diplomatic fiasco for Donald Trump, although he still talks about his good relations with the North Korean dictator. And so what? Trump lost interest in negotiations with Kim Jong-un and in the North Korean nuclear program altogether. Although this program, if the Korean nuclear arsenal is deployed on ships in close proximity to the United States, truly threatens the national interests of the USA. He still talks about his own success in conversations with Kim Jong-un and his own readiness to return to their communication. In the Russian-Ukrainian war, Trump might behave in this manner if he fails to achieve quick success, if no ceasefire occurs by the date set by Donald Trump, and we are talking about Easter, then what meanings might the American president seek in further negotiations with the president of Russia and the president of Ukraine? The question arises, what will Donald Trump do after he changes priorities? Will he maintain the status quo in the United States approach to the Russian-Ukrainian war? Meaning, will he keep the sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation and be ready to continue helping Ukraine with weapons? Or will this assistance to Ukraine end with the current package we are receiving now, for which we owe thanks to the previous American administration? Or, after a ceasefire cannot be achieved, will the United States continue negotiations with the Russian Federation on other important topics for Russian-American relations, such as economic projects between the two countries, security in the Arctic, or the Russian Federation's mediation in negotiations between the United States and Iran on the Iranian nuclear program? In my opinion, it is not worth thinking about how Donald Trump will behave in this new situation, because the American president himself, with his chaotic and impulsive policy and completely unprofessional approach to foreign policy challenges, does not know what he will do, not even in the coming weeks, but in the coming days and hours. There are no plans that would suggest Donald Trump is aware of the direction he is heading. And there never were and never have been, of course. There is the famous Project 2025, which is a project for reformatting America itself and its foreign policy priorities. However, like any dogmatic program, this project does not withstand the tests of reality. And that is why it is not worth assuming that Trump will follow this program without any changes in his own policy. So, in order to understand how the American president plans to exit the game in the Russian-Ukrainian war, and whether he will succeed in doing so, because we should not forget about public opinion in the United States itself, the challenges related to Russian-Chinese relations and the relations with the European Union, there is a huge number of components that Donald Trump may simply be unable to summarize and with which he will inevitably have to deal. So, only after this will we be able to discuss the question of what the role of the United States will be when the illusory nature of Donald Trump's hopes becomes apparent, that he will be able to persuade Russian President Putin in at least something. Will the American president shift to a tougher policy, or will he really try to pretend that what is happening on the Russian-Ukrainian front no longer concerns him? Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow my social media and my Patreon channel, Buy Me a Coffee, Donatella, which help develop these resources. Use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Victory and peace to you.